As a Brit, I wasn't educated in the glory of pump actions, so I've had to seek out this obsession for myself. Above all pump actions, one reigns supreme in the court of popular opinion. And that gun is the Ithaca Model 37. Because I wanted to get to know what this cult was all about, I bought one out of the Holts Sealed Bid sale, and found myself an excuse to visit a playground with the true red-blooded American that is Kyle from Weatherby.
Kyle, why is the Ithaca 37 the greatest pump action of all time?
Well, you've got a couple things that it's going to do for you. You look at the age of this gun, and you realize that ahead of its time, they already were figuring out the whole left versus right issue, right? Mm-hmm. So, bottom ejection, you're not kicking shells out across your face, you're not kicking shells in other people's faces in the blind. So, to me, that's kind of a big benefit on that gun, because even with our semis today, you're getting shells pounding off the side of your head when you're shooting birds.
That's why you always pick the left-hand side in the blind.
Bingo.
Yeah. Unless you've got a left-handed shooter.
Even then, I still take the left. He can deal with it.
Yeah.
Just put him on the far end.
Well, no, you know, fling them at each other.
Yeah. It's kind of like a battle.
Give it an ejection war.
Why, to you, is this the best shotgun?
I don't know. People told me it is. I've shot it, and I believe them. It's slick. It's beautifully engineered. It's just... It's not like a pump. It's not horrible. It's not cheap.
No.
And that for me is a bit rare. Most pump actions are cheap and horrible.
Well, I mean, you look at, manufacturing techniques of this era were completely different than what we do today.
Okay.
So
because they actually had to make it as opposed to just stamp it out.
Bingo. Yeah, you're not sitting there just stamping metal products, taking edges off of them and putting them together. No, these guys were hand fitting half of these parts, if not all.
And that's why it feels hand fitted.
Yeah.
Because it is. You own one, right?
I do own one.
Not like this.
No, mine was from my grandfather. It has the different fore end, and it's got some fancier engraving with some gold inlays. Like he had found it long ago. It's an amazing gun, and the only box of shells ever through that gun is from me, and he didn't tell me that until after I shot the box of shells.
Is it even your granddaddy's gun if he didn't shoot it?
Well, he ordered it and waited years to get it, got it, and at that point he was too busy shooting other things. And so it just sat in the safe for years and years, I guess.
That's still your granddaddy's gun.
Yeah. I have all his other guns, so.
You have to go and write some stories with it. That's
that is the plan eventually, yes.
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet. I've been too busy shooting his old Parker.
So this is a 16 gauge.
Yes.
It's my first ever 16 gauge. Generally I think 16 gauges suck, but I really like this.
I have never played with an Ithaca 37 in a 16, so it's going to be interesting with that poly choke too.
Show us the way, brother.
Oh gosh.
Give me the controls, take the gun.
It
is awkward that you can't see that it's empty. It's about the only downside to the bottom ejection.
It is. It kind of makes you a little bit nervous, so you're just always looking at where that corn cob is sitting at. Like, is it open or is it closed?
I think you should just shoot with people you trust.
That's usually a good way to go.
After you. We have a sport trap here at Bywell in the north. If you could eject them into the bucket, that would save us a lot of picking up.
Had a little rough start. It takes a little bit with the old poly choke in the front. That's a lot of sight picture right there.
It's a very wide lump in front of your face.
It very much is.
But you get over it.
Yeah, but she runs smooth. That is slick.
It is a thing of beauty, right? I'm getting well into my pump actions. There's a lot to learn about the history of American guns with pumps. They mean a lot to you guys from what I understand, and to us they're just junk, but I'm trying to get out of that mindset.
I don't know, it's something about nostalgia, you know what I mean? I mean, you think about it, it takes you all the way back to the market hunting days, and it takes you back into the history of where waterfowling in our country kind of like evolved out of.
And they still make that today, longest ever running pump action.
Yeah, you talk about a modern day, like a pump action that they have not changed anything on.
I'd really love to get my hands on a new one, you know.
Be interesting to compare how smooth it is.
They're $1,400, $1,600. It's not, I mean, it's a lot for a pump.
It's a lot for a pump, but
it's not a lot for a gun.
No, and if it's machined the way this one is and hand fitted,
right?
You'd be getting
it's a lot because the Turkish can produce them for $400.
Yeah, but they're stamping metal and assembling. They're not really actually fitting. They're not polishing. I mean, this is just, it is so smooth.
All right, then let's rock and roll.
Yeah, your turn.
Oh, how do I follow that performance? Whoa. Get on, boy. This gun was described to me as the Rolls-Royce of Pumps, the best pump action in the world, the best pump action ever made by many people who've used them. And I honestly just thought it was some kind of weird cult. It's not. Maybe, but it's not a weird cult because actually shooting this pump action was unlike any pump action I think I've shot before. The whole experience was enjoyable. It shot well, it moved well, and actually the operation and the build quality was superior to any pump action I've shot before. Most pump actions are built to such a low standard and such a low price because they represent that part of the market more than anything, that perhaps in my head that was just what all pump actions were like. And I've had a bit of a fascination with older pumps for a while, and I've shot a few, but this one is by far the nicest. Let's look at this gun back to front and maybe talk about why I think it's actually good. The answer is it is a sum of its parts, because there's nothing about it that's superb and outstanding, but the sum of its parts make a good tool. There's also a nice bit of heritage to it, I think. This gun is 1960. That's an old gun by most accounts. It's not side-by-side ancient hammer gun Holts old, but it's pretty old. And the model itself has been around since 1937 and traces its roots back to 1915. There's a lot of heritage here. And then when you take into account what this gun means to so many different people, in that this was the gun their grandfather hunted with, it's the gun they hunt with. This gun was used by militaries all over the world, predominantly American, obviously. There's an Argentinian copy used by the Argentinian police. This was used by the NYPD and the LAPD in the 80s. There is a lot of stuff going on here in terms of mythology. But let's start at the back. This pad is not original. It's a really poorly fitted rubber one. If you look at various models, they come with various pads. Not this one. It's a lacquered finish American walnut stock of grade 0. It's just a proper user piece of wood. No fancy grain, nothing. You know, if I didn't know better, I'd say it wasn't walnut, but it is American walnut. It's just very boring piece. The lacquer finish, you know, there's nothing wrong with a lacquer finish. It's not designed to be anything other than good. It keeps the rain out of the wood, keeps the wood strong, and will protect it for some period of time. And that's cool. It's pretty tarnished, it's pretty worn, but she's, what, 63 years old. There's no checkering. I guess that's preferable, because if they were to do checkering, it would probably be that horrific stamped style you see on so many early pump actions, and a hand checkering job would probably have pushed this into a price bracket where it couldn't have been used by the people who needed it and wanted it and actually got so much joy out of it. That said, hand checkering would be nice. The grip radius is actually quite large. That was the first thing I noticed when I picked it up, is although it looks pretty horrific, it feels good in the hand. What isn't that pleasant is the stock dimensions. If you can see, it's very low and very parallel. It is just high enough to shoot, which is way better than most of the competition. I think it's just the illusion of the way this comes from a high action into the bottom that makes it look quite so low. The line isn't offensive either. It's a good looking gun. The action itself is completely steel, and there are various types of this action. This one features pretty rudimentary engraving game scenes. You've got a setter and 2 pheasants. They could be seagulls, who knows? And this is presumably just rolled in. I don't think it will have any hand finishing involved. If we look at the other side quickly, you have 2 ducks, 3 ducks. It's not bad. I mean, it's better than a plain action, maybe? You tell me. It doesn't set my heart on fire, but neither am I offended by it. I don't really care. It's not an exciting addition to the gun, but it may be better than a plain action. On top of the action, you have this machined line that sort of serves as the rear sight to your front sight. You do get ribbed version of this, I believe. This is a ribless 16 gauge 28 inch with a poly choke attached. It's a blued barrel, fairly rough finish. All of it's fairly rough finished, but it is nice. Like, it's taken to what, like a 200 grit maybe? 180 grit, which is better than a lot of guns out there, but it serves a purpose, it works. Anything else than that is unacceptable and unnecessary. Screws, you have some screws in the side. There is a locking one in the top with a little locking screw, and there's a screw in the other side here that helps take it apart if you feel the need to do so. I mean, is that better than pins? Maybe not, but it's probably stronger and sturdier, and this gun was famed for its strength, both in hunting and military circles. A lot of that also comes from the fact that there is a bottom ejector. It bottom feeds and bottom ejects on these 2 tiny rods, and honestly this is the thing that shocked me, is that these are coined as stupidly reliable, and all it does is run off of 2 little rods that eject and feed up. No big loading plate, nothing like that. It's quite cool, actually. If someone presented this to you now and it was made of lesser quality components to a lesser finish, you'd probably not seem so happy about it, but it works perfectly. And again, it's a testament to the quality of build. And when you actually look internally, a lot of these parts are hand filed and hand finished just to get them working and regulated. They're not just left raw and clipped together like a lot of modern cheap pump actions. What's nice about this action, well, firstly, before we say anything, the trigger pulls, really nice for a pump action, very clean, little spongy but not bad. The safety catch, nice, positive, steel. With safety catches, you want it to be positive enough that you know it's not going to come off, but you also want it to be stiff enough that you know that it's gone off. I like a positive click. As you know, I'm a safety catch player, and this one's a good one. This lever here pulls back, and the slide comes back accordingly. It's a big lump of metal. In fact, there's so many big lumps of metal on this gun and good quality steel, big lumps of good quality steel, that you just can't help but feel you've got a quality gun in your hands. The slide action, the actual manual pumping of it, is slick as well. The design dates back to a 1915 Browning patent on the Remington Model 17. Ithaca looked at the market and said, that Winchester Model 12 is dominating. And the Winchester Model 12 is a nice gun. I've shot one. I've never done a video with one. I think this is nicer. Semi-controversial opinion. I do think it's nicer. So they looked at the market, looked at the Remington Model 17, and sort of modified themselves from there. So this has Browning roots, which is kind of exciting for those Browning fans out there. What's kind of cool is that they originally designed it to be released in 1933, but the patent didn't expire until 1937, so they had to wait. This could have been called the Ithaca Model 33, which would have been a really big mouthful for someone with a speech impediment. So I'm glad that they didn't do that. It's a sweet design. There's no loading port in the side going back a few steps, which means no dust, grit and grime can get in. Generally when you carry a shotgun, it's this way up. Unless you're really cool and you carry it like that, but even that's stupid. The weight turns it the way it wants to be. Unless you have anti-gravity muck, it's not a space gun, you're not going to get stuff up inside the action. And when that action is closed, as you can see from the bottom there, it's closed. There's not many ways in for stuff. That's good. I like that. That is good. This gun has the corn cob forend, named because it looks like a cob of corn. It's great, it's low profile, it's slim. There is other variants, I think they're uglier. I like this one, if we're going to be picky. It's driven by a single manual bar on the side. That is, I mean, some people say one's not enough and dual bars are better, but actually where it's so big, thick, and slotted into a nicely machined bit there, or put into a nicely machined slot, there's no slack, there's no looseness. If you give it the rattle, if you put your thumb on the forend, yeah, it doesn't rattle that much even without your thumb on the forend. The gun comes apart quite easily. There's a nut on the front here, right? And unintuitively, it doesn't undo left, it tightens towards the gun. So you turn this right, and this nut moves down. That moves out of a little slot here, and the whole barrel, after moving that slide back, it's already back, turns half, these interlocking threads at the back here. It's so easy to take down. Proofed, nitro proofed, 16 gauge, 70mm in 2013. It's really quite tidy. The internal of the bore is pretty rough. Like, you're not talking high polishing or chroming or anything like that, but from what I'm led to believe, this is semi-stainlessy stuff, so these don't rust and rot out the same as some other guns. The poly choke on the front is an aftermarket addition, and for those who don't know what a poly choke is, we'll screw it off. Inside here you have petals. When open, they are nominally 16 bore, the same as a true cylinder. This has a taper on the inside, so when we tighten it up, it starts pushing those petals together and causing constriction. And you have on here, full mod, improved improved cylinder slug, full and extra full around the other side. It is a deluxe model. I don't know what the difference is. I have seen really big, horrible ones that get in the way, but actually the way this works with the bead sight just sat on top there, it doesn't get in the way. I was kind of worried that that would make it unshootable like many of the polychoke guns I've shot in the past. It just makes them nasty. This is a nice one. Don't ask me how different it is. I'm not a polychoke expert, but I should Google that now I've actually fallen somewhat in love with this gun. I feel like I'm going to probably go on a bit of a geek fest down a few rabbit holes on the Ithaca 37. Not that I haven't already, to be honest. This is the Featherlight barrel, or the Featherlight spec gun. They do a deer slayer. You couldn't market a deer slayer gun in the UK. But they do a gun called a Deer Slayer. I love that. That's cool stuff. They do riot guns, all kinds of stuff. You know, this was a trench gun. This was a military used gun in World War II, Korea and Vietnam. It was used by Green Berets and Navy SEALs. Not en masse, but quite a lot. And it was, again, hugely popular, firstly, because it's hugely reliable with no side port, and secondly, you can slam fire it. The whole slam firing thing, pretty pointless to most hunters. It's a lot of fun when you go down a playground, and honestly, it will put a smile on anyone's face slam firing a gun, meaning there's no safety interceptor on the trigger. So when you've kept that trigger down, when you pull the trigger and slam the slide forward, the hammer falls. So as soon as that engages, the bolt engages, it's in a nice safe position in terms of secure, the hammer falls and makes it go bang. Obviously in a military and police scenario where you're talking about fairly close combat, bigger targets, not a flying bird at 40 yards, it's probably handy to get rid of the 4, 5 or 7 shot magazine quickly without having to be Jerry Michalek and be able to pull that trigger as soon as the slide goes forward. They do one with a heat shield, that would be quite a cool one to find. But again, they're really rare in the UK, and as such, I did pay good money for this. There were 2 in the Holts auction, which is where I got this, the Holts Sealed Bid. This 16 gauge and a 12 gauge. I think the 12 gauge was in at sort of 70 to 90. I put a real strong bid on that. But because I wanted to make this film and I didn't want to lose out, I put a cheeky bid on this gun, which I believe was in at 180 to 220. So I put a cheeky bid on it, and I was lucky to win this one, but somebody must have paid strong money for the 12 bore. Honestly, that is some serendipitous stuff. I don't think I would have liked the 12 bore as much as I like this. This is my first ever 16 gauge. I mean, I've handled them in the past and they've gone through my hands for a couple of days, but this is the first 16 gauge that I want to keep, that I can afford. You know, I was lucky enough to go and play with Archie at West London and shoot their Perazzi 16 scaled action, which was lovely. But this, I was in for just under £300 for. Looking at Guns International, in America this is a probably $600 gun, $500 to $700 gun. So on the grand schemes of international gunnery, I'm not unhappy. Guns are worth what someone's willing to pay, in all things. And in the UK where these are rare, they're still in huge demand, and that is because of that cult following in the USA. Anyone who starts looking into quality pump actions will come across an Ithaca Model 37. And I think I will say at this point that people were right. This is the greatest pump action of all time.
Kyle, thank you for sharing the experience.
It was wonderful.
It's an American gun, and I think definitely underappreciated here.
You know, even in the States, it's underappreciated.
Really?
Yeah, everybody's in the semi-auto craze right now in the States.
Okay.
You know,
It's definitely a better tool.
it's an easier tool to shoot, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah.
So, but we are seeing a resurgence on that because there is a lot of nostalgia in the uplands right now. So we're starting to see kind of those making a comeback, and they're not as easy to find on the shelves anymore in the old pawn shops.
How acceptable is a pump in upland hunting? In my head, I just see people shooting double guns.
It's completely acceptable if it's an old one.
The world's a funny place.
It is. Well, upland hunting is very traditional. That's where the over and unders come into play. But if you're going to shoot a pump, make sure it's old. Model 12s, Ithaca 37s.
Where's the cutoff?
It shifts on a daily basis because we're not getting any younger now. So I would say right now about mid 60s to early 70s.
Okay.
So I've seen some old stuff, like some old 870 Wingmasters from the 60s era. Completely acceptable.
That's a cool old gun now.
It is. So, it's a similar idea. It was all steel construction, and it wasn't as much hand fitted, but
No, I'm not I know there's a huge following of the 870.
there is. I'd rather shoot that.
I would agree. The
Yeah.
870 feels cheap.
It's bulkier. That gun has always been slim and nimble. It's a very lively bird gun, and I think that actually makes it harder on a clay course at times too, though.
Thanks.
Yeah, just,
I needed that.
yeah.
I needed that.
Thank you for watching, guys. This channel is made possible by our amazing sponsors. You can find out more about them in the description down below. And if you want to support the channel, you can join as a member. You get loads of extra content, well, some extra content, and occasionally we hook up and go clay shooting together as a membership group. If you don't feel like joining today, we really appreciate you watching and subscribing. Have a wonderful day.
So it turns out describing this gun as the Rolls-Royce of Pumps is not an overstatement. The big question is slam firing ever useful or appropriate in bird shooting or clay shooting scenarios?
Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Is this just a good waste of ammo? Probably.